Mhm. Not yet.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Chicago Sports HQ Chatter here on the Unscripted Sports Network. This is your host, Dustin Reese, alongside to my left, producer Jay McLovin. And joining us today, we have the voice of the AAA affiliate of the Chicago Cubs from Iowa, Mr. Alex Cohen. How are you doing today, Alex?
I'm doing great. How about you guys?
Not bad, not bad. Jay, you?
I can't complain, man. Like I was telling you earlier in another previous show, the Astros somehow another beat Seattle last night, and I was on pins and needles, by the way, all the way to the end, and we actually kept our playoff hopes alive. So life is good. Life is good.
Well, at least your team is keeping their playoff hopes alive because our team is kind of throwing them away one error by a time right now against Atlanta, so that's really not helping. But Alex, getting to Iowa season this year,
Sure.
it was a pretty historic season. We're going to say that from the get-go. They had one of their best seasons in franchise history. You look at the offense they put together, the runs they put together, and if we go back to the pre-COVID days, I think this is a playoff team, and I think you would agree. But because of the new AAA playoff format, it kind of just is unfortunate that Iowa doesn't get in. Just kind of, what was your take on the season this year as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, the playoff format definitely doesn't help when you have to jump 19 teams and not in the PCL when you jump 9. So it's a big difference, and especially when you end up 17 games over 500 and you don't clinch a playoff berth. So I think that's a little unfortunate, but you brought it up. I mean, it was one of the best offensive teams in franchise history. When you said a franchise record for runs scored, extra base hits, walks drawn, OPS, on base percentage, it doesn't really get much better than that. So seeing guys like Christopher Morel start off the season, Matt Mervis, Pete Crow Armstrong, we had 7 walk-offs. We had 4 walk-off homers, back-to-back days of walk-offs against the Memphis Redbirds, AAA affiliate of the St. Louis Cardinals. So that made for a lot of fun here at Principal Park. Guys like Jared Young, Jonathan Perlaza. It was great. I've been the voice of the Iowa Cubs since 2018. It was the most exciting team that I've been a part of. So I hold that in pretty high regard.
And we'll kind of get into some of those players in a little bit, but unlike a lot of minor league affiliates and whatnot, AAA is always, to me, kind of the most intriguing level to watch because you have the highly regarded prospects, obviously, that are knocking on the door. You always have those situations where you're signing veterans to minor league deals, signing them to AAA kind of to give them a chance to do something. You have the players going through the injury rehab system that's kind of getting resituated with the team. This year with Iowa especially, it seems like for the most part, every player that contributed to Iowa at some point also went to the major leagues and contributed to the Cubs at some point this year, whether it was good or bad. Just how do you think the performance in Iowa this year, especially knowing how Morel started and players like that, helped kind of with their production once they got called up this year?
I think winning breeds winning. And I think you start that with last year, South Bend Cubs obviously winning the Midwest League Championship. And then this year, Tennessee Smokies winning the Southern League Championship. And then 3 affiliates of the Cubs system being over 500, 10 games over 500 at least. And I think that winning breeds winning in that locker room starting in spring training. And I think, having guys here, you brought it up, the Jared Youngs, the Miles Mastrobonis, the Pete Crow Armstrong right now, even though small sample size. Matt Mervis going up for a little bit and having up and down results. Jordan Wicks coming up and going 3-0 in his first 3 starts. I think if you look top to bottom and the Icons lineup from day one, they made big league contributions, as you said. Christopher Morel having 11 home runs with us and then going up into the big leagues and having 20-plus home runs up in the big leagues. Alexander Canaro having that huge stretch with the Iowa Cubs. And then coming up and in his first start, hitting a grand slam and driving in 5. So I think the tangible effects from the Iowa Cubs going up to the 2023 Chicago Cubs and impacting a playoff run, you can feel that. It's really exciting.
Yeah, some of the players that I think a lot of people expected to see in AAA this year, like Jordan Wicks, Pete Crow Armstrong, and other guys like that. I think not only did they produce at a high level, but they did better than what people thought they would. I'm going to start with Jordan Wicks, for example.
Sure.
When the Cubs took him in the first round, a lot of people kind of compared him to Cole Hamels because of that changeup and just kind of the way he pitches. And yes, he had an up and down 22 in terms of the results, but all he did this year in the minors was go 7-0 in the minors, didn't lose a game, goes to the majors and starts 3-0 before he lost.
Yeah.
So taking off 25, 26 total starts now. The guy is 11-1 this year. Just what did you see out of Jordan Wicks? I know he was only there for like 9 or 10 starts compared to what he was at Tennessee, but I really do like the makeup of Jordan Wicks. And if the Cubs somehow do find a way to get into the postseason, I'm comfortable putting him after Justin Steele and Kyle Hendricks right now as that number 3 in the rotation.
Yeah, Bulldog, pro. I mean, I think I said it right when he got called up. He could come out and start, and it's not his best stuff, or he doesn't have full control, and he will still find a way to give you an opportunity to win. Look at the start where he gave up, 3-4 runs in the first inning. It was our second start with the Iowa Cubs, and then he came back and he threw 4 scoreless, and he gave the I-Cubs an opportunity to win a game, and they ended up winning that game. So I think that he is well beyond the learning curve of being a 2021 first-round draft pick. I think that he's a guy that can adjust pitch by pitch, batter by batter, inning by inning on the fly. And I think that's somebody that every 5th or 6th day that he goes out there, he will give you an opportunity to win. And that's what you want out of a starting pitcher in 2023. So I'd be comfortable, too, giving him that third starter role in the playoffs in a potential 3-game, 5-game, 7-game series. But fortunately for the Cubs, they have Jamison Tyone pitching well. They're getting Marcus Stroman back. Kyle Hendricks obviously throwing well. And Justin Steele, a Cy Young candidate. So you kind of have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to your starting rotation.
And then another guy that I know people were really high on was Ben Brown, especially when you look at what he did right after he got traded from the Phillies organization to the Cubs organization, and then the start he got off to this year before he kind of struggled a bit going into the All-Star break, comes out of the All-Star break and gets hurt before they kind of moved him into the bullpen a little bit. Given the nature of where that Cubs bullpen is right now, and I think everyone's starting to see how fatigued that bullpen is right now, it just seems like everybody's got a forearm injury or pretty much call me out of the stands, I'll come up and throw an inning for you at this point because that's pretty much all you got left. Are you surprised the Cubs haven't even considered bringing Ben Brown up at this point just to kind of give the bullpen some help, just because it doesn't seem like they know what he's going to be long-term right now?
I mean, I'm sure they've considered it when you're dealing with a lower body injury, especially late in the season when you've already thrown 100 innings. And you're a 23-year-old pitcher, you have a bright future for you. You want to be careful with that. And seeing Ben come back, his first couple outings out of the bullpen, he was 94 to 96. His last 2 outings, he was 97 to 98, and finally started looking healthy. So I think they're taking a conservative approach with that. I think they want him to be healthy. I think they want him to start throwing in the offseason, and then come spring training, you finally figure out that role. If he's going to be a back end of the bullpen arm, fastball, breaking ball, or if he's going to be a starter. So it's only his first full year in the organization. I think they have a conservative approach to him, just based on the injury history. Remember, he's a guy who came back from Tommy John surgery too. So I think that being careful is a smart decision with Ben Brown. And I think that 2024 is a huge year for him.
And I know a lot of people look at the numbers in AAA, especially with the ERA, and they kind of are like, wow, these pitchers really aren't that good. But unless you follow AAA baseball, you don't realize how difficult it is to post a low ERA in AAA, especially in the Pacific Coast League. What other pitchers were you kind of impressed with this year, even if their ERA was high? One guy that comes to mind for me is Cam Sanders, because it seemed like he gained a couple miles per hour on that fastball this year. It seemed like the breaking ball was as good as it's ever been. Yes, he did have some moments of command problems, and he did get hit hard at times, but Cam Sanders, to me, kind of established himself as one of those guys that, like you said with Ben Brown, I think 2024 could be a huge year for him in terms of maybe becoming one of those back into the bullpen pieces.
Yeah, I mean, Cam has incredible stuff. He has big league, back end of the bullpen type stuff, topping out at over 100 miles per hour. His slider is disgusting. Also has a really good changeup, but it's just, as you said, control throwing strikes. Early on in the season, Cam was averaging over a walk per inning. Over the course of the season, he was averaging a walk per inning, and you can't have that. up in the big leagues. If you're coming in a situation like that, your expectation is to, one, throw strikes, and two, get guys out. And I think that he needs to throw more strikes. I think if you look at his last 10 outings of the year, they were pretty impressive. I think he had a 3.5 to 1 strikeout to walk ratio. He averaged like a walk every 2 2/3 innings. The control's starting to get there. The confidence starting to get there. Remember, he only became a reliever midway through last year, so it's his first full year being able to do that routinely, pitching every 2 to 3 days instead of pitching every 5 to 6 days. I think he has big league type of stuff. He just has to throw more strikes. So he's a guy that definitely stuck out to me. Then at the end of the year, Brendan Little, former first-round draft pick for the Cubs, was up in the big leagues with the Cubs for a little bit of 2021. If you look at his month of September, he had a sub-2 ERA, threw a lot of strikes, struck out a lot of hitters, and was completely dominant against left-handed hitters. So niche-wise, role-wise, I think Brendan Little does have an opportunity to make a big league impact. It's just finding more consistency. But those are the two arms that really stick out to me.
And speaking of Little, there was another Little that we shouldn't even call Little, given how big he
Not
is.
Little.
And Luke Little, who is also a southpaw in the Cubs system. I was very high when the Cubs took him, knowing how hard he can throw and just kind of the secondary pitches that he has with it. I was surprised he got the call to the majors over Brendan Little, just because Brendan Little's kind of had more time in AAA to figure out the type of pitcher he is. What are your initial thoughts of Luke Little, and do you think now that he kind of has that 10, 15 games under his belt that he could be one of those opening day possibilities for next season as kind of that lefty in the bullpen that the Cubs lack this year?
Yeah, he defines lefty in the bullpen. 6'8", throws 95 to 97, sharp breaking ball, incredibly difficult to pick up, crossfire delivery. He has that front shoulder set down where left-handed hitters can't even pick him up. So I think that he is the definition of a left-handed reliever. I think that's somebody, if he shows consistency during spring training, in big league spring training, that he can get it done, he will be a big leaguer. So that's my opinion. I think the sky is the limit for Luke. I mean, when you have a 6'8" lefty who throws 95 to 98, I mean, you're basically touchdown from God saying, you were put on this earth to play baseball. So I think he's a really good kid. He's a good locker room guy. He's somebody that, again, he got that taste of the big leagues. He got the taste of the forbidden fruit. And if you go to spring training and you pitch well, he should be in the big leagues for a long time.
And now we'll get on the offense, where offensively this team reminded me a lot of that 2021 Omaha team, where pretty much anytime someone came to bat, you had a chance to hit a home run. And that's kind of the feel that you got throughout the first half. Obviously, the two names we're going to talk about first here are Alexander Canario and PCA. Canario went off and just decided to have one of the greatest seasons in the Cubs minor leagues in quite some time last year. Suffered a horrific injury during the winter ball.
Two horrific injuries.
Yeah, I'm surprised he even came back to play at all this year, let alone got to the majors and has done what he's done. And same thing with PCA. He was a guy that I figured would be maybe knocking on the AAA door by the end of the season, but I did not expect him to be called up at this point. Granted, I might be the minority on this. I think both of them should have stayed in AAA if they're not going to see much action in the majors, because what are they really getting by maybe seeing 1 or 2 at-bats a week at this point? But initial thoughts on PCA now that you've had a chance to see him in person, and then same thing with Canario, granted how slow he got out of the gates once he came back.
Let's start with PCA. I mean, I think if he's somebody that you send him out there and he plays every single day, he hits ninth. He's somebody that at the beginning of the season, he might struggle first 2 weeks. He's done it at every level, but then he'll get better and better and more comfortable and more comfortable. And I feel like he has to hit a grand slam home run with nobody on base and do the impossible. And I think that the Pete that we saw at the end of the year was, or at the end of his stint here with Iowa, was he had 7 hits in 4 games and he was going opposite field. And he wasn't swinging at every pitch. And he was working 6, 7, 8 pitch at bats. Anything offensively for him, to me, is a bonus, because he's the best defensive outfielder I've ever seen. You go into that locker room.
That's what a lot of people have said, and I haven't had a chance to see it yet, but that's what I wanted to ask you too, is just, I think the first game that you called on Marquee with him, it was, I want to say it was against Omaha, where 2 straight innings, he just went full force, 100% into the wall.
Yep. No, he's the best defensive outfielder I've ever seen. I mean, you go into the I-Cubs locker room, you talk to the coaches, and they're not ones to bring lofty expectations or praises on their players. They want to keep them grounded. But you go into that locker room and you hear comparisons to Kenny Lofton, Andrew Jones, Ken Griffey Jr. Like, that's the real deal. So I think for me right now, anything you get from him offensively is a bonus. I think that defensively he can win you games. And I'm not that torn up about him going up there because this was his first like real full season at Double A and
Yeah.
Triple A. Remember, he already had 600 at bats. So it's not like you needed to get him that much more playing time, in fear of him possibly getting hurt or banged up. I think with Canario, you have the late season start. Obviously, just trying to get that bat speed back. He had a 2-week stint in Iowa that he was probably the hottest hitter on the planet. And then you bring him up to the big leagues, and yeah, I would have loved to see him back down here in Iowa because he only had 250 plate appearances throughout the year. I would have loved to see him get to 350, 400, but when you can help a big league team for your big league organization make a playoff run, that takes precedent over everything. So there's no doubt in my mind that he can get experience in winter ball, or if he goes to the Arizona Fall League and then spring training, and then we'll see what happens.
Biggest question I think a lot of Cubs fans have at this point is, what is the future with Matt Mervis? We kind of saw last year Matt Mervis, I think, was the biggest surprise in the system, especially when you look at how rough the 2021 season was for him. Comes out and puts up numbers that we haven't seen since basically Kyle Schwarber and Anthony Rizzo in terms of a left-handed power bat. He didn't show as much power this year, but he still was producing at a high level. Cubs called him up, gave him a chance for 20, 25 games, and then kind of had the same thing right now where they didn't play him and sent him back down. What do you think is his future with this team? And I'm going to leave it kind of as like an open-ended question, because if the Cubs retain Cody Bellinger, that's going to be kind of the mystery with where he falls.
Yeah, I mean, it completely depends on what the Cubs decide to do in free agency and what they want to do with PCA. If they're going to bring up, PCA to be the starter in center field at, opening day 2024, and Cody Bellinger, you re-sign him to be first base, well, odds are Matt Mervis is probably not going to start. If anything, he'll be the DH. And I think that's just simply from a numbers game. But it's interesting. You look at Mervis's stats over the course of the entire year. He had 25 homers. He had 25 doubles. He drove in over 90 runs. At the AAA level, he had a higher on-base percentage this year than he did last year. He had a significant amount of walks. His strikeout rate dropped. So I thought all in all, he had a really successful year. Obviously, you want him to get a little bit more rope up in the big leagues to, trial by error, succeed and fail. And given the team and where they were at in the playoff race, he wasn't given that opportunity. So I can understand why. David Ross said that he wants to go with his guys that got him there, and he's completely entitled to do that and go with the team that's had, a pretty large amount of success and surpass expectations over the course of the year. So I think Matt Mervis's future with the Iowa Cubs, with the Chicago Cubs, is completely dependent on what the Chicago Cubs decide to do November through January.
And I think another player that's kind of on the same boat is one of my favorite players, especially after watching what he did this year, is Jonathan Perlaza. Knowing that he's not on the 40-man roster right now, and I think can be taken by somebody in the Rule 5 draft this year if the Cubs don't add him. I think they'd be foolish not to put him on that 40-man roster right now, especially after what he did this year. And if you do add him to that 40-man roster, it now becomes a question of who are you taking off and what are your plans for him? Because I hate to say this just because I don't like when players lose their jobs because of injuries. But I think Brennan Davis may have his days numbered, especially when you look at the last 3 years constantly being injured and having guys like Jonathan Perlaza just kind of break out this year.
I mean, I'll stick specifically with Perlaza. It's not just this year. It's 2022 as well, where he had 20-plus homers, 30-plus doubles with Double-A Tennessee, and then you go up to a different level as a 24-year-old switch hitter and post a higher batting average and have more walks and a higher OPS and a higher on-base percentage and more homers and more doubles. So all he's done has gotten better and better. And in an era of baseball that has a universal DH, you cannot tell me that he can't play for one of the 30 teams in baseball and be a DH and be able to hit from both sides of the plate and be able to contribute at the big league level. There is no doubt in my mind that he is a big league caliber hitter. So I hope the Cubs protect him. I think they should protect him. I think that he provides value, but I also think that the Cubs are in a really fortunate position where you have a 40-man roster and you have 45 to 50 players who can contribute at the big league level and provide value to not only them, but also to other teams.
And then the other question I asked Sam Wiederhaft the other day when we had him on here was kind of the new minor league playoff formats for you guys. how at least in AA and single A, you have the first half champs, the second half champs. So if you win your division, you get in no matter what for each one of those halves. I'm at the point now where maybe it's because it just happened to Iowa this year where they were pretty much in first place the entire first half, but it didn't matter because Norfolk had such a good first half. I'm at the point now, maybe just for AAA at this point, just do away with the first and second half champs. Play out the duration of like the 150 games and let the top
Well, they
four
did that. They did that. I mean, and now they decided to change that. And I think that that format works if you have equal divisions and you have equal leagues. You know, when you have a 10-team Southern League and a 10-team Texas League and a 10-team Eastern League, you can do that. When you have a 10-team PCL and a 20-team International League, you can't do that. It shifts the pendulum a little bit. So I think that the half format works if you have equal divisions and equal leagues. So one shoe has to fall. If you're not going to have equal divisions or equal leagues, go back to a traditional format, as you said. If you have equal divisions and you have equal leagues, then you can have a half format. I think it's as simple as that.
And then since you've now had, I think, 3 years under the new 6-game series format as opposed to the old 3, 4, whatever series they wanted to give you, are you for or against that 6-game series? I'm on the fence about it just because I don't like seeing the same team 6 times because you see their entire rotation at least once, and then you're throwing whoever threw Tuesday is throwing again on Sunday, and I think it takes away from teams having an opportunity to play more teams in the International League, more teams in the Pacific League because you're not playing everybody anymore. Now it's strictly pretty much your entire division with a couple other teams sprinkled in here and there.
Yeah, I definitely look at it from 2 standpoints. I look at it from your standpoint and the competitive standpoint that, yeah, you would love to see more teams, and I don't want to see a bullpen arm 3 or 4 times in a series. That dilutes the competitive advantage or disadvantage. But also, I'm the team's travel coordinator, so I love planning less flights and less bus rides. So I look at it from that standpoint. From the wear and tear standpoint, you know, 6-game series are definitely better. And from the competitive standpoint, they're definitely worse. So there's a push and pull, there's a give and take, and I think that they, you know, have to try to figure it out.
And then last question I have for you before I'll kick it over to Jay for some questions.
Sure.
What is, because I know you've called obviously some spring training games because I've seen you call some spring training games before. What do you like most about calling minor league baseball? Whether it be, I don't know if you started at the lower levels and worked your way up, but I guess what do you like calling more about minor league baseball that some people might not realize when you're not calling the game, I guess?
It's just, and I don't think this is like exclusive to like minor league baseball, but just baseball in general. I mean, getting to the ballpark on a Friday night during the summer, when you have 11,500 fans and you have fireworks after and you have a walk-off home run against, you know, one of your rivals. I mean, there is no better feeling atmosphere in sports that I've ever called. And, you know, I've called basketball, I've called football, I've called softball, I've called gymnastics, I've called hockey. I mean, when you get a walk-off bomb in front of your home fans in the summer and it's fireworks and, as I said, it's 11,000 people and you beat Memphis, like the hair on my arms kind of sticks up thinking about it. So I think just like atmosphere-wise, in the big leagues you have it too. But in minor league baseball, I do think that it's a little bit more special and fun and free.
All right, Jay, what do you got?
Yeah, mine is just more, you know, I was just kind of curious. I know the minor leagues, you know, or at least with Major League Baseball and the Players Association, they really kind of bumped up the pay that these guys are getting now. I used to hear the horror stories all the time about living out of their cars and stuff like that. How do the minor league players feel now, at least, you know, in Iowa? How do they feel about the pay that they're getting now and their living conditions and things like that as they're trying to work their way up the ladder run?
I think you got to crawl before you can walk. I think you have to walk before you can run. I think they're now in the walking phase. I think that they're getting the non-40-man guys getting their housing stipulated and paid for. It certainly helps. And I think that where they need to grow is the consistency they have from organization to organization. You know, with the I-Cups, they had some pretty nice housing here. And I've heard from some other organizations the housing wasn't so nice. So I think they need some consistency within those organizations and within those levels, you know, what they can do, what they can't do. But here specifically with Iowa, I think that the housing conditions were better. Getting food enrichment conditions were better. I mean, we had a full-time, I wouldn't call her chef, but a nutritionist that came in, and her name was Paige Haven. She did a spectacular job keeping the guys healthy and making sure that they were nourished and were able to afford food and being able to maintain a big league professional athlete diet. So I can only speak specifically from the Cubs organization. I think they're doing it right. Just from what I've heard with other organizations, it isn't consistent. So I think it needs to be more consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. I was telling Dustin, and we talk about this all the time. There's a lot of MLB clubs, in the league that really are more or less free agent driven in their teams and less on the farm system driven in their teams. I won't mention names: New York Yankees, Mets, teams like this. And I give Frankie such a hard time. The Astros, have been lucky enough in our organization that we have driven primarily through the farm system, aka pretty much anything south of our border. but yeah, I mean, we drive heavily in our farm system, and I see the Cubs do that. And I tell them all the time that Tampa Bay does it. The ones that have the lower, payrolls in the league do it, and they're getting championships, or at least they're in the playoffs, versus the other ones. And I tell them all the time, I was like, I feel like you have to grow organically through your farm, and then sprinkle it with a few free agents where you need to. And I think that's kind of the measurement for success. How would you rate the developmental side of your minor league organization in terms of developing your players and your pitchers to really get up and be the best they can be once they get to the professional level?
Well, I think that development of the minor league system is huge. I mean, if you look at the last, 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years, the organizations that have won minor league championships, the Baltimore Orioles, Norfolk right now. I think it was Delmarva that won 2 years ago. Tampa with Durham and Bowling Green winning year in, year out. And you look at those organizations and what their minor league affiliates have done over the last 3 or 4 years and what they're doing now. There's no question about it that if you win at the minor league level and you're able to find those players who can breed a winning environment, you're going to win at the big league level. Look who just won the Pacific Coast League Championship, the Oklahoma City Dodgers, one of the best teams in the National League, the Los Angeles Dodgers. So that type of success breeds organizationally, organically, and not just at the big league level, but also at the minor league level as well.
Yeah, I'm not really too familiar with Iowa. I just kind of looked at a few things I found online, and I was looking at where you are in the stands. It looks like you're about third in the standings. What do you think about this Iowa team where you are now, and where you see them next year in terms of growth?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been the voice of the Iowa Cubs for 5 years. 2 winning seasons. 2019, they made the Pacific Coast League playoffs, and this year, obviously, a non-playoff team. I think on paper, on the field, this team was better than that 2019 team, which is really impressive to see. I think you look at the level below, the Tennessee Smokies just won the Southern League Championship.
And the year before that,
A-ball team, they made it to the playoffs in the Carolina League. So I think that the Cubs system is in really good shape, really good position. I think they've drafted really well over the last 2 years. I think that they've made trades for guys in the minor league system that have really helped them, trading for Ben Brown for David Robertson, trading for Hayden Wesneski for Scott Efros. I think that they have pushed all the right buttons. It's just developing that talent and making sure that, from AA they succeed in AAA, and AAA they succeed up in the big leagues. And I think they've been able to do that.
Yeah, the last thing I wanted to say, I'm going to turn it back over to Dustin. It's not a question, more of a comment. I can just speak as an American League team. You're a National League team. I wish you nothing but the best. And if you were the Yankees, I'd tell you go to hell.
Appreciate it.
Hey,
I spent some time up in Milwaukee, and I'm not a Brewers fan by any means. So anytime that Cubs can beat the Brewers, I typically always root for the Cubs. So.
Yeah, Cubs Stros World Series. Let's get it done.
Yeah, like you were saying too, Alex, with Tennessee winning this year, you had South Bend winning last year, and I want to say roughly 70% of that Tennessee roster was on South Bend last year, so it was kind of like a winning pattern. And now you look at the Tennessee roster and put it to kind of where that Iowa roster might be next year.
Yeah,
you're probably looking at 50 to 60% of that Tennessee roster coming up. Like Owen Casey, especially, because Owen Casey decided that he wanted to be the best hitter, I think, in the Southern League all season long. And you could argue that he was the best hitter in AA all year. Now you have a guy named Matt Shaw that says, "Oh, you can draft me in the first round this year, and I'll just hit my way all the way to AA." And I'm not going to be surprised if he opens next season at AAA, given what he did this year.
Yeah, I mean, I watch that Tennessee team, and I love listening to Mick Gillespie, their voice, and they were so much fun to watch, man. They could hit, and then hit some more. I mean, you talked about Owen Casey and Matt Shaw, but also BJ Murray Jr. and Kevin Alcantara, and there is so much talent hitting wise in this Cubs organization to the point where they might not have room for everybody, and they're going to have to make some trades, especially outfield depth. I mean, it's probably the best outfield depth. You talked about Yonathan Perlaza, outfielder, Pete Crow Armstrong, outfielder, Darius Hill, minor league hit king last year, outfielder. Brendan Davis trying to get back healthy, former number one prospect in the organization, outfielder. Kevin Alcantara, outfielder. BJ Murray can play a little bit of everywhere. Owen Casey can play first place, and he can play outfield. I mean, it's really impressive, man. It's really impressive that they've been able to build.
And last question I have for you before we get off is, how excited are you to see Cade Horton next year?
I hope I do see him. You never know. A guy who's had so much success, just named the minor league pitcher of the year, and you've seen the Cubs' ability, with Jordan Wicks, less than 2 years after getting drafted, bumping him up to the big leagues. Maybe they do that with Cade Horton. I mean, you never know. I would love to see Cade Horton March 29th in Omaha being the opening day starter for the Iowa Cubs, but just depending on what the Chicago Cubs do in the winter, in spring, how he looks, things could be different. I can't predict the future.
All right, Alex, before we let you go, do you want to tell the listeners where they can find you? Obviously, I know you have a Twitter, but I don't know if you do any other stuff off-season-wise with baseball being done now for you.
Yeah, no, you can follow me on Twitter at Voice of Cohen 2. Also check out iowacubs.com for all the stuff that we have. Iowa Cubs on Twitter, Iowa Cubs on Instagram. We'll have some fun promotional stuff going on throughout the offseason. And then I'm also broadcasting sporting events for Iowa State, so you can watch on ESPN Plus. I'll be doing some volleyball, some men's and women's basketball, so I'll hopefully stay busy. But nothing will quite be like calling 9 innings of Iowa Cubs baseball. So already counting down the days for that.
All right, thanks for joining us, Alex, and I'll be sure to have you on again once we start getting into that whole free agent period and we can get a sense where the Cubs are thinking.
Let's do it. No, I appreciate you guys having me on, and Jay will be speaking that Cubs-Astros World Series into fruition. I'll talk to the man upstairs and see what he can do for us.
I just want to get past the damn Seattle Mariners.
I hear you, man. I hear you.
That's like my damn nemesis. That's like my kryptonite for Superman. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, well, it wasn't your kryptonite last year when you won the World Series.
Thank God, man. Hopefully we can do it again this year. Right now there's so many good teams out there, and it's such a, Arizona's tight. We still got 3 games to go with those guys, and they're fighting for a playoff spot. I mean, there's still a little bit of unfinished business, to be done and dealt with, and I fully expect this to be an exciting playoff run in October.
I hear you on that. I'm right there with you. All right, guys. No, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
I'll see you later.
Thanks, man.